We're going to whip through this stuff here. Now this is steering and suspension test 6. Is that right? Steering and suspension test 6. Alright, we talked a little bit. This is just some basic front end alignment stuff. Talking about and everybody, has everybody in here done an alignment? Yep. Everybody in here has hooked the machine up. So if I throw a car at you that somebody brings in that they want alignment done on, then you can throw it up there and you can line it up so that they're not going to wear their tires out, right? Everybody's able to do that without fail. Right? You know how to make your caster, camber, and toe adjustments. And you start out in the rear if it's a 4-wheel alignment, and it's one of those that aligns in the 4. In the rear, you're going to start out with by making sure that the rear ones are in line first, because you're shooting from those. You see, your thrust lines back there and all that. And then when you come up front, you're going to do your caster, your camber, and your toe. The toe's the last adjustment you're going to make. On some cars, it's the only one you can make. But you can measure everything. You can measure steering axis inclination, but you can't change it, right? But if you, and why would you want to do that? Why would you want to measure it if you can't change it?
Well, you can, I guess, if it's out of specs, you can add new parts.
If it's out of specs, you'll know there's a problem there. Now, like I say, if something's bent, you can add new parts. But basically, if steering axis inclination is wrong, in some cases the body shop's got to hook it up with their frame straightener or something. You know, there's not anything you can really do to change steering axis inclination, really. I mean, if you were going to change it, like let's say you were going to take some extreme measures and you were going to change steering axis inclination, how would you do it? Let's say you're building a car, right? Now from not necessarily from scratch, but you want your steering axis inclination to be different from what it is. And everybody knows everybody still remembers what steering axis inclination is, right? Everybody can draw it. That's actually the imaginary line that's drawn through your ball joints as compared to vertical. Got that? So let me ask you, if I was going to change my steering axis inclination on purpose, and I had anything and everything I needed in my, to fabricate or whatever, exactly what would I do to make that steering angle less than it was when it was designed? There you go. That's smart. I would actually not necessarily put an A-arm. You're going to have to change the relationship between the ball joint and on the arm. Yeah, you're going to put a longer one. Put a longer upper A-frame on it. Or a shorter lower A-frame, right? You see, if you shorten the lower A-frame, that's going to change the relationship of the ball joints to each other and make it. But now if your steering axis inclination is changed, you're actually changing a bunch of other steering geometry that you don't want to change. So the long and the short of it is just understand what that is. One of the things that Mike Moore, who is an expert in, he's probably the smartest guy that I personally know. Maybe apart from some of these world-class trainers I run into up at KC Vision and places. But he's the smartest local guy I know on alignment and front end and all that kind of stuff. And he said one of the biggest problems that he's got when he hires somebody, and even when he trains them to operate his, that machine he's got, which is similar to ours except it's a different brand, is that they can make those numbers look right on the screen, but they don't have any concept of what they did. You know what I'm saying? In the real world, they don't have any concept of how they changed it. He started out, with a stick with 2 pointers on it and some stuff with bubbles when he was a teenage boy doing alignments, and so he has done it for just about it. He started doing that about the time I started, pulling steel, for a living. I did that for 25 years for pay. But I did it before that for my dad for free. So I did it for a while for free before I started doing it for money. Okay, to compensate for road crown, vehicles have a slightly more positive camber angle in the right front wheel than on the left front wheel. That's false. That's false. Even though there is a compensation for road crown, but that's not how you do it. I'll leave it up to you guys to dig that up. Even though steering axis inclination is not adjustable, it should be checked during wheel alignment, and that is correct. Incorrect included angle could include a suspension or vehicle structural problem. That's true. What's included angle?
It's like I know what it is, but it's like
it's camber and steering axis inclination, isn't it? Add those together. Pretty much what you're looking at there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, 2- and 4-wheel alignments provide equally accurate results. Well, I would say no. You know, a four-wheel alignment's going to do a better job than a two-wheel alignment. The deal is, well, let me ask you this: if you're working on something like the Bronco, or well, your pickup may have independent suspension. I'm always pointing at Webb's pickup because he probably got the newest truck in the room. What is it? Is that a 12 or a 13? Huh? What year is it?
2013.
Oh, it's a 13. Okay, so you may have rear wheel adjustment on that one. I don't know. If it's got a, is it got a solid axle under the back, or is it? Okay, well some of these vehicles will have a chunk in the middle and CV axles going out. You know what I'm saying? And some of those will actually have some adjustments you can make on the rear wheel. But you're going to check those rear wheels first. Even if you can't adjust them, you want to know where your thrust line is, and if that axle's bent, and maybe your towing camera's out for some reason. I mean, you need to know that. You know, it's just part of what you need to know. Okay, so tow angle is adjusted by changing the length of the tie rod. Is that true? That is true. How many of you recognize and you remember, and I don't, this sounds like really elementary stuff, and I don't want to, I can almost leave that same picture for what I'm going to draw. When you've got, what you got is you got on the ones that are, a lot of them, you got a sleeve on some of these, you know, rear wheel drive ones. It's got some clamps on it that you loosen up. And you got threads here and you got threads here. This is going out to your ball joint, I mean not your ball joint, but your tie rod end. And this is going into the, you know, drag link or whatever. Well, you got this sleeve here. You understand, on some of them they'll have a nut here and a nut here instead of having those clamps. But basically, this is a turnbuckle, which means basically it's got left-hand thread on one side and right-hand thread on the other side. Now, you guys seen when you replace this, and this was kind of funny. This girl, that was funny, but it wasn't. It was scary. This girl came in here with she was in my program at the time. She was driving a Power Stroke diesel, and it was old. It had a lot of miles on it, and she drove it all the way from red level, and she was bouncing over potholes and driving 60, 70 miles an hour. And she pulled in there to to park the truck, and she came into class, and then she needed to move the truck so she could pull something else in the stall. When she was moving the truck, one of the tie rod ends came apart, and the wheel went like this. That's scary, isn't it? After all of that driving that she did. I've seen that kind of thing too. We used to drive this Dodge pickup truck. It was a 77 model, and we would go bouncing along through all of these potholes and everything, going down to the Bean Cafe. The whole bunch of us, they let us take a company truck because we couldn't be gone for 30 minutes. And we come bouncing back. It's a truck that we maintained at the shop. And we pull that thing in, and the boy that drove the truck drove it around the yard greasing cranes and stuff the rest of the day. And when he pulled it in, we'd always pull the trucks into the shop at night and lock them up. When he pulled that thing in, and it had a cast iron bumper on the front of it that we put on it, when he parked that doggone truck, the lower ball joint popped on that thing, and that bumper hit the ground like a ton of bricks. Now, see, if that had happened when we were driving 60 miles an hour down that curvy old country road, bam, we're talking end over end. And when we looked at that ball joint, the cross section of that ball joint, you know, if you looked at where it broke, it was really dirty. Half of it was really dirty, which means it had been cracked for a long time. You know, but you couldn't tell it just looking at it in the normal inspection, you know. And I saw another one of those Dodge trucks. It wasn't that same one. It was one that was bought at the same time. I was driving behind that one when one of these tie rod ends came apart. And what happens then, the right front wheel starts acting like a shopping cart on that one. And he's all over the road. He's on the left side. He's on the right side. He's doing this. I see him fighting, and he goes off finally, and he gets stopped. You know, but if there had been cars coming, it would have been head on. You see where I'm going with that? I mean, this is serious business, guys. You know, you got to pay close attention to this stuff. But the long and short of it was, I told these guys, I said, we're going to change out this tie rod in. Now, counting the turns gets you in the ballpark, but it's not going to put it back exactly where it was. When you change a tie rod in, you know, screwing it off and screwing it back on, it's usually about 21 turns or something like that, roughly. That's rough, but you need to count them. Well, it's one guy that I told to count the turns. What do you think when I say count the turns? If you're going to screw something out there and count the turns, what are you going to do?
Count for one full turn.
Exactly. You're going to go, all the way around the clock. You're going 360 degrees. That's one turn. You know what that guy did? And he was pretty smart, I thought, until that moment. I says, count the turns. He grabs it. He goes, 1, 2, 3. I mean, however much he could turn it with one turn of his hand, he was counting that. how can you do that? I mean, how can you expect to get anything accurate that way? You got to go 360 degrees and do it that way if you're going to do that. That was funny. But anyway, we managed to get her truck straightened out. Her truck had a brake problem later. It was real interesting too, but that's another story. Okay, after you complete alignment adjustments, you need to center the steering wheel so that it's positioned correctly in relationship to the front wheels. And that's true. Basically, whenever you centering the steering wheel, and that's really a sort of a badly worded question. Didn't you and Daniel do an alignment on his car, and he has a crooked steering wheel now? Does anybody know why that happens? Why would you have a crooked steering wheel after you get through doing alignment when it wasn't crooked before?
Line up the steering wheel to begin with.
Because when I did it,
It got bound up.
Yeah, it got bound up.
And then he did all of his adjustments. Now that's one of the reasons you put a steering wheel holder on it. Well, before you put the steering wheel holder on it, you better joggle it back and forth, and then get it dead in the center where you want it to be, and make sure that that's where it wants to be, and then put that steering wheel holder on it real solid. Because if you don't, and I've seen people just doing a toe adjustment without anything holding the steering wheel. I've also seen the guys in the olden days just step in there and line the thing up where it was in the middle and just, be real careful. But more often than not, when you do that, you're going to wind up with the steering wheel crooked. And in eons gone by, you could take that nut off the middle of the steering wheel and pull the steering wheel off and turn it a little bit and put it back on because the splines were all equal. Nowadays, they won't usually go on there but one way. And I tell you what's really crazy, if you say, well, I want to drive it down the road and I want to make sure that it's right? So you've got the nut off of it and you're driving along real slow down the street and you pull the steering wheel off and you stick it on while you're driving it. That's pretty scary, isn't it? I'll tell you what's crazy about that. There's a guy that I know that's got a shop in California that writes for the same magazine that I did, and he and I were comparing notes one day, and both of us have done that. It ain't smart. Don't go where there's traffic and do that. If you're going to do that, you can do it in a parking lot where there's nothing out there but you, but don't dare do it whenever there's other cars around. You hit a pothole and all of a sudden it's gone. But anyway, that's just funny. There's a lot of stuff that, that people will do when nobody's looking, though. You know what I'm saying? And it's just really something that you ought not to do. Okay, let's see. Rear-wheel drive vehicles with a fixed rear axle housing assembly may provide adjustment of camber and toe. No, they won't. You'd have to bend the doggone thing to do it. Incidentally, on your truck, that little Ranger that you've got, it's got that front I-beam that uses these little, you got to replace those little bushings on yours to adjust the camber and toe. You got a bushing in there now that's permanent, that has got a little flag on it so you can't turn it. And but if you ever have to do an alignment on yours, you can basically, you're going to use these kind of little these bushings that are eccentric. You put that in there, and you're actually going to turn that with a wrench, and that's going to change your adjustments. It's only a limited amount, but you get different ones for angle change and all. Okay, when the top of a wheel tilts in, the wheel has what? A, negative camber, B, negative caster, C, positive camber, D, positive caster. Number 9, that's going to be what? That's negative camber, right? I always think about this, negative, positive, negative, positive.
Right. On number 5, it was true, wasn't it?
Let's see, number 5, yeah. No, well, that's not necessarily. That's false, because you can actually do a 4-wheel alignment without having to adjust all 4 wheels. When you measure all 4 wheels, you're checking all 4 wheels, but the ones that you can't adjust, you're not going to be able to adjust anyway. And like I say, there's some of them you can't adjust anything except toe. If you actually look up in the book, it'll say there's nothing you can do to change camber, or there's nothing you can do to change caster. So you're not going to, the only adjustment you're liable to make on some of them is going to be the front toe. You can't even do nothing to the back, so be aware of that. When the upper ball joint's behind the lower ball joint, the wheel has what? A, negative camber, B, negative caster, C, positive camber, D, positive caster.
It's a caster thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Let me see what that phone call's about, because it may be important.
This has to be negative.
Hey.
Oh, no.
Hey, Sharon, I was going to see if I could get you to type a letter of recommendation for Abby to get a scholarship. Well, in the next couple of days. I think the 4th of March is the cutoff.
Negative camber? Negative caster?
Well, it's one of them non-traditional student applications to the foundation. I just do a to whom it may concern deal. I'm gonna write her one too. Yeah, that's the one she's applied for. Okay. That's the way I'm gonna do mine. All right. Thanks, Sharon. There you go. She's gonna write one. All right. So sorry about that, about the interruption there. But let's see, where are we at? 10. When the upper ball joint is behind the lower ball joint, what is it?
I'm gonna go with a negative.
Positive caster.
Everybody happy with that? Positive caster. Think about what you're doing here. The farther you go forward, the more you, like if this is the front right here, the farther you go forward, that's more positive, right? Now think about this. If you go too far forward, you're going to have road shock. Bam! When you hit the road, and whenever you tilt it back a little bit, it's more. If you go too far back, it's kind of squirrely. You understand how that would work? I mean, it's you've seen, yeah.
How does a gasser do it though? Like they lift up the whole front end on like a old gasser for the drag strip. Like they lift up the car's front end and have it like all stretched and everything, all the suspension, the steering, right there is stretched.
I'm not sure what I don't understand your question.
Like what I'm trying to figure out is how they got it completely equal, even though it's stretched out and modified straight.
Well, that's not too difficult. Basically, if you're the steering axis as far as the tilt forward and back of it, those hot rod cars have, gosh, they got all. I mean, the race cars on the track you're talking about, they got all kinds of adjustments you can do on those. You can change everything. They got big, long, threaded stuff that you can just move stuff every which way you want to go. You can tighten or loosen the suspension. You can just do all kind of crazy stuff on those, which is totally beyond the pale, you're not as concerned with the kind of driving stuff on those as you are a regular car going down the road. You know what I mean? I just get really disgusted with that telephone. Hello? Hello? Hey. Hey, Jerry, let me call me back in about 10 minutes. All right. All right. Now then, let me see here. Number 11. Excessive positive caster does what? Requires more steering effort. That's right. Creates low speed shimmy and causes snapback.
My low speed shimmy.
Like when you're driving slow, it can make it start, your steering wheel back and forth. A caster shimmy can, do that. And I tell you something else. If a car does not have power steering, if you got a car you're landing that does not have power steering, the caster settings are going to be more negative because it makes it easier to steer. You got me? You don't want to put too much positive caster on when they ain't got power steering. I'm talking about your 66 Galaxy. The car that I drove, it was a 65 Galaxy. There was column shift, no power steering, no air conditioning, and it had an AM radio with an 8-track tape player, red interior, 289, 22 miles to the gallon. I could go to the beach and back on 1/8 of a tank of gas. But it didn't have no power steering, and so I had to have more negative caster. Okay, let me see here. The distance between the steering axis and the center line of the contact area of a tire is called, anybody remember? Scrub radius. Did you say that? Let's listen to that girl. Scrub radius is A. That's the right answer. Especially, you had a mental picture of that, didn't you? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Did anybody else get that? Okay. A specialty tool that can assist you with the center of the steering wheel is known as a what?
Steering wheel holder.
Steering wheel holder. What you see is what you get. And that's all the questions you got on that test, isn't it? No more. If you don't have any matching questions. Okay.
3 more.
Huh?
We still got 3 more.
3 more?